In the quiet moments before the world wakes up, there's a place where pain meets peace, where every breath feels like a prayer and grief stands still. We carry the weight of what was and search for meaning in the smallest things. And sometimes all it takes is one moment to remind us we're still here, still healing.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk About the Podcast. You guys know who it is. This is Tony Lynch. I am the host of this podcast. And yes, we are your number one podcast to bring you stories around death, down to grief, all the messiness that comes in between, with some amazing people out here doing some amazing things, changing people's lives one heartbeat at a time. Now, before I bring on the next guest, I would like to say that this is a live stream. So if this is your first time tuning in, head on over to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. But most importantly, please put your questions and comments in the comment section. We'll get to them. And now, one more other thing. This is for educational purposes only. Now, without further ado, I'm going to bring on my next guest. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Chris Shelton to the show. Chris, how you doing, brother?
Hey, man, how you doing? Thank you so much for having me, Tony.
Of course, man. Of course. And thank you for the opportunity to have you on the show, man. We had the chance to connect and talk for a while there, right? And, man, you have such an incredible story, But before we get into that, let's talk about who Chris is. So introduce yourself to the audience, man. Tell people who you are, where you're from, about the work that you do.
So the version of this Chris Shelton, but the ego version of it, I'm a healer, a practitioner of classical Chinese medicine. I teach classes in Qigong for mental health, Tai Chi, Chinese philosophy, Chinese nutrition. I think I was Chinese in my past life. And we're really on a mission right now, or have been on a mission for quite a while, to show people that you don't have to live with chronic pain and disease, that if you understand the body, you could transform it just like that. And, a lot of people don't realize, but the leading cause of death and disease, at least according to classical Chinese medicine, and when I talk about classical Chinese medicine, I'm talking about like acupuncture, herbology, those types of things. But according to classical Chinese medicine, the leading cause of death and disease, besides poor diet, is negative emotions. And it's not that emotions are bad. It's when they're not processed properly or repressed, or even worse, disconnected from altogether, that starts to show up as inflammatory conditions and disease.
Wow, man. Let's dive a little bit into the negative emotions, because I think sometimes people don't realize that they're doing it, and that can just be a sequence of events that's going on in their lives as well, too, right? Because when you have like a month or so things are going bad, it's kind of hard to see the other side of it, right? You just kind of go with it, right? Accept it for what it is. What are some examples about negative emotions?
So the most common ones that I see is the negative emotions of resentment and old anger. And a lot of people don't realize that resentment, old anger, hatred, frustration, irritation, even being too controlling actually will affect your liver and your gallbladder, which then your liver has over 800 functions inside the body. And then that shows up as diseases, from migraines to menstrual disorders for women to depression. Depression is when anger is turned inward, anxiety disorders, but also too like sadness, grief, loss, shame, guilt, worry, anxiety, fear, PTSD, shock. And when I talk about shock, we're looking at things like, surviving abuse, neglect, surviving a severe illness, or if you're a first responder or ex-military or something like that, or out on the streets, and such. Whatever you see there, that kind of stuff will affect, in particular, the kidneys, and then this shows up as disease. And again, these emotions aren't bad. Like anger has gotten a bad rap. Anger is there for you to fight for the underdog, to create positive change in the world, or do something creative in the world. But if anger is causing you to drink too much, if anger is causing you to explode, have road rage, go home, kick the dog, then that anger is no longer serving you. And then that's where these practices that I teach of Qigong, for example, are here for people to be able to have the tools necessary to be able to not only deal with the day-to-day things that create frustration or irritation, but also more importantly, the old stuff, because it's an accumulation. And then eventually, your body says, okay, and when we look at depression, for example, it's when the anger or the old anger, sadness too. Sadness could create, obviously, depression. Grief could create depression as well too. But normally when we see depression in the context for which I'm talking about is due to the fact there's been this buildup of anger and resentment, and the person has not have the tools offered to them to be able to deal with it, or even realize that it's there.
Yeah. Now that leads me to my first question: Is it more common within men or women?
That's a good question. I would say men are more prone to showing the anger. Women obviously can too. But one of my new books that came out this last year was Chris Shelton's Easy Guide to Fix Neck and Back Pain. And I talk about the cervical spine, the thoracic, mid-spine, and lower lumbar. And I talk about what internal organs actually control each of these different areas and what emotions. In the lower lumbar, one of the main things is we look at anger and resentment as being one of the root causes, for the lower back pain. And when a patient comes into clinic here, back issues are pretty easy for me to fix. But the only time that I have a hard time fixing it is if a woman has resentment towards some male figure. And it could be a father, it could be a husband. And they're not really willing to acknowledge that, hey, I have this I'm holding on to this stuff, and I don't know how to let go of it. In that case then it's harder to fix the back issue, because one of the functions that the liver has is it influences the sympathetic nervous system. So think about it. If you're angry, what do you want to do? You want to fight. Sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight. And so if the body thinks, hey, I'm in fight mode, then guess what? Then I'm going to pull on certain muscles, in particular the psoas muscle, which attaches to the spine. I'm going to pull you forward because I got to protect these delicate organs here. So if I have a woman, for example, that has resentment towards a male figure, it could even be a female figure that's very masculine, and not willing to acknowledge it, then that's when it's hard to fix.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Now, let's go back a little bit. Who was the version of? How did Chris become who he is today?
Okay, so I grew up in a dysfunctional home with abuse, neglect, a lot of neglect, mainly neglect. I didn't get punched in the face all the time, every once in a while. So I started doing drugs at a young age. Also started having sex at a young age too. And I started doing drugs at age 12. I was doing speedballs. I wasn't shooting it though, with heroin and coke. And I progressed into, LSD, PCP, marijuana, all that kind of stuff, cocaine. But meth was my all-time favorite, But even though I was doing these drugs, I was highly motivated. I have a older half brother that was in trouble with the law all the time. He get sent to juvie, then they send him to the boys ranch. He'd escape from the boys ranch, and they send him to CYA, California Youth Authority. And so I knew how to stay, watching him, I knew how to stay one step ahead of the law, at the time. And so I still was doing my EP studies in art. I started becoming a butcher at age 15 and a half. I ended up being a butcher for 21 years. I was going to school half-time. Started my sophomore year, I'd go to school, high school part-time, and then a bus would come pick me and some other kids up, and we go to this adult educational school where I got my Class A state brake license, my license for overhauling engines, cylinder head and reconditioning, tune up an electrical system. So I thought, okay, if I don't make it as a butcher, I'll be an artist. Don't make it as an artist, I'll be a mechanic, right?
Yeah.
So even though I was doing these drugs and stuff like that, and I was wrestling and stuff like that, I still had this inner drive for some reason. Anyways, fast forward, my birthday's in September, senior year of high school, right before my 19th birthday. I had a heart attack from a meth overdose. And I overheard, once they got me to the ER, And the doctor was talking to my father outside the curtain. You know, I overheard the physician say that, you know, if he was any older, he should have died. He would have died. And he said he got a hold of some bad stuff. And so, you know, so I'm hearing him talk to my father like this, you know. And so obviously 19-year-old boy, frontal cortex not fully developed. And so I was thinking to myself, you know, started thinking after the fact, like, oh, I've gotten stuff that's never gotten me off before, but nothing's ever done this. So it must have just been a fluke, right? And so about 2 months later, I used again, and I had another heart attack. This one was less severe, but because of the shame and the guilt surrounding the first one, I didn't call 911 that day. I figured I was just going to die. And luckily I didn't. Luckily I pulled through. A cardiologist did confirm that I did have a second heart attack. And, you know, he was just brutally honest with me. He says, you know, because of your age and stuff, you know, we don't know what kind of damage that you've done to your heart. You know, one day you just might not wake up. And so I realized I had to change my path. I was going to end up dead, in prison, or both. So I put myself into Taekwondo to change my path, give me some discipline. And as a side note, I had other severe health issues too that started around age 15 or 16. I had severe digestive issues. If I ate any kind of animal fat, or if I ate a salad or an avocado, I was vomiting or in the fetal position in the middle of the night or a couple of hours after eating that. And I lived on all kinds of medications, antibiotics. You know, I had an upper GI. They scoped all the way down in my stomach, had it from the other side as well too, try to figure out what was going on with me. And luckily they didn't take out my gallbladder, because normally in those situations they take out the gallbladder.
Right.
And then I had severe sinusitis. I lived on all kinds of medications because that, it's severe allergies. And so anyways, I started competing in full contact right away when I started training Taekwondo. And in fact, as soon as I got my yellow belt, I started competing full contact. And then one night before a match, I accidentally kicked in the low back, just timed it just right, and left me with a devastating back injury. And the doctors at the time were saying, Chris, if you move the wrong way, if you don't have surgery, you might not, and you move the wrong way, you might not walk again, or things you take for granted, like being able to go to the bathroom, have sex again. And so another physician had a different, you know, idea about this, and she had a therapist working for her, and he was a martial artist, and he was talking about Qi. Well, in Taekwondo, we call it Ki, right? But he was talking about Qi, this life force energy stuff. You know, now I'm probably, 20, 21 years old. And the closest thing to Qi that I was going to get was like Cheese Its and Cheese Whiz. It ain't easy being cheesy. Like, you know, it's like,
I love it. Oh,
so
man.
this concept of Qi, man, like, you know, I had no idea, you know. And, you know, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area and East San Jose, and nobody back then was talking about Qigong, you know, maybe Tai Chi and Kung Fu, because Bruce Lee, you know, back in the day, right?
Yeah.
But in Kung Fu, but really internal martial arts, all that kind of stuff, like very few people were, especially here on the West Coast, that I knew about. So anyways, I started taking these Qigong classes, and there's only a couple women in the class. And they're having all these experiences, you know, oh, I feel the energy here, there. Well, I thought I was a Qi dud because I didn't feel nothing. I mean, I feel like hot, I feel cold, I feel tingly. But the stuff that they're talking about, I was like, man, I want some of that, especially being an addict. I want some of that, right? So,
yeah.
So anyway, but after about 6 months, I can't tell you when, but it was the realization that I wasn't having stomach problems anymore. It was a realization that I could breathe without having to take medication. So I couldn't give you an exact pinpoint date, but it was all of a sudden just the reality of like, oh, I don't have to live on these medications anymore. Right. So I thought to myself, if a simple, specific Qigong movement and or meditation could do this to me, there must be something to the medicine. And so that's how I started studying classical Chinese medicine.
Okay. Wow, man, that is truly amazing. Truly amazing. And which leads me to my next question, right? Because you've had quite the adventure. as you begin to develop as well, right? So, what part of your journey did you have that aha moment?
Mm. So fast forward, I got married a high school sweetheart, and had 2 kids. Um, she actually had a fibroid that was attached to. She was actually my first patient ever. She had a fibroid attached to her sacrum about the size of a small orange or grapefruit, and she only weighed about 109 pounds, 111 pounds, something like that. She was really petite, and the pain medication that she was on was enough to topple over a 250-pound man. They said it wasn't touching the pain that she was in. So my instructor at the time, that same instructor, said, "Work on her." I said, "Work on her? What does that even mean, work on her?" So he said, there's this meditation they do in the Beijing hospital called the ice water vapor meditation they use for cancers and fibroids and stuff like that. So I start working on her, just palpating, feeling over the sacrum area, imagining the tumor turning ice, water, vapor, imagine getting smaller, and then release that into the ground, right? And so when I first started working on her, she'd be now pain-free for like 24 hours at a time, right? And so now I'm doing specific Qigong meditations for standing meditation between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., a 2-hour standing meditation to increase my sensitivity and stuff like that. Anyway, so fast forward, she has, she has the first surgery, and then she almost does die on the operating table. But the surgeon says, "Hey, I'm not even going to touch this thing, and I'm not going to try to pull it out because she'll bleed to death," right? He said, "But it has to come out. Otherwise, it's going to keep on growing because the sacrum is very vascular, a lot of blood flow in that area. So the blood's going to keep on feeding this thing, it's going to invade the other organs and kill her." So we have to wait several months. We get a specialist from Russia at Stanford. Anyways, now when I'm working on her, she's now pain-free for like a week at a time. And finally, we have the surgery. Again, she almost does die on the operating table. A few days later, let me backpedal a little bit. That first surgeon, what he did was he measured the size of that tumor, and he's expecting it to continue to grow. Anyways, now we have the second surgery. She has the surgery. The radiology department comes in a few days later, and they said, "What did you guys do between the first surgery and the second surgery?" Because we didn't no radiation, no alternative treatments, just the Qigong stuff, right? And I said, "Oh, I was doing," and this is before Stanford had an alternative part of their hospital, right? I said, "Well, I was doing this stuff called Qigong," and here we go. And the one radiologist said to me, they said, "Well, whatever you did worked because her tumor shrunk 5 centimeters by 5 centimeters." And so I thought, wow, okay, so a little side digression too, because she was a stay-at-home mom and stuff like that. And so I was a full-time butcher, meat manager at the time. I also was working. I started a business as a freelance artist. I was also working 1 to 2 nights a week at a private art school up in Cupertino, California, teaching oil painting. And then so this is one of my first aha moments. Like, wow, like there's something to this, and so anyways, so fast forward, I think because I was doing so much internal cultivation or internal work on myself, that ex and I, we were at one point like this because we went to high school together, we were growing together, but at some point she stayed here and I continued to do this. I continued to grow.
Okay.
So we ended up getting a divorce, or I ended up divorcing her. And part of the reason for it was that, I was doing Air Force ROTC in high school. And my plan was to join the Special Forces in the Air Force. And my codependent self, she talked me out of doing it. And so when I told her that, I wanted to pursue studying Chinese medicine and stuff, and even after it helped her, she didn't want me to invest the time, right, to do it. And so not only vibrationally, what did I outgrow her, but it's like, no, man, like there's something calling me, All right. So now I'm going to fast forward. And a lot of craziness going on in between then, that marriage and stuff like that. And then one night, I was helping out my instructor, and at the very end of the class, this gal, Janet, she says to me, you'd be great in our clinic in Los Gatos, California. Now, I just finished doing an 8-year medical Qigong program with this instructor and such. And I sat on it for 2 years because I was a single father of 2 kids, a meat manager. And, it's like, how am I going to go from doing this to healing people? Like, it didn't make any sense to me, And so anyway, so Janet told me on a Wednesday night, she says, you'd be great in our clinic. We have acupuncture, we have chiropractic, massage, blah, blah, blah. So that was Wednesday. By Friday, out of fear, my ego was talking me out of doing it because, again, as a single father, 2 kids, kind of living paycheck to paycheck, as a meat manager, it's like, how am I going to go from being a meat manager, managing these knuckleheads and cutting up dead cows all day and, raising these kids to healing people? So when I went to call her, picked up the phone and called her, seriously, Tony, I heard a voice say to me, this is your last chance this lifetime. And so I took a chance, and here I am now 24 years later.
Wow, man. Wow, that's truly inspiring, right? Because I think we've all gone through it. And you say it's ego, and I do believe that that's correct, but I think a lot of it is imposter syndrome. It's designed to keep you from doing the things that you want to, because we are our own worst enemies, right? Our ego is that dark shadow that's constantly telling us you can't do this or whatever, right? And thank you for taking the step, because I know so many people, and this could just be because they're uncertain of the unknown, because that's what a lot of stepping into different paths takes, right? Is letting go any sort of expectation, along with any sort of this is a control of how things are supposed to be, right? Now, being where you are today, what are some of the things that you've learned along the way that benefited not only yourself, but helped you expand to helping other people?
First and foremost is perseverance. That's first and foremost. I have self-doubt. Every step that I made, like as a meat manager, man, brother, I was making okay cash. I had 100% medical coverage, 100% orthodontics and dentists, plus a pension, stuff like that. Like, to walk away from that, is scary. That secure paycheck, right? That secure paycheck. And so every step that I made, well, the first step, when I started, by the grace of God, you can tell when you're on the right path too, when things just open up or align with you. So as a meat manager, it was against union contract and company policy that a meat cutter, let alone a meat manager, could not work less than 40 hours a week. That's the minimum that you worked. And as a meat manager, you're expected at least 48 hours, right?
Right.
And so what ended up happening was that I got started in that clinic in Los Gatos. We worked out a deal where I just gave them a percentage of each client, but I still had self-doubt, man, because I'd have 1 patient, then no patients, 2 patients and no patients. I have 1 student and then no students. Oh, and that instructor of mine, by the way, when I started my practice, I became his enemy, and which really threw me off because I'm very loyal to my teachers, right? And and what was mind blowing to me was that him and his now ex-wife, she's a prominent 2nd generation acupuncturist. They'd tell me, man, you're a healer, like you're a natural at this, Chris. You should do this for a living. So once I started, and I think what happened was that I landed a contract with Marvell Semiconductor when they were a very small company. And I don't know if word got back to them, but I negotiated a deal with them that they paid me $13,500 up front on my integrity that I'd show up and teach a 1-hour Tai Chi class every week. It's not too bad for a guy starting out, right?
Right.
So he stopped progressing me with the Tai Chi and stuff like that. And I was teaching supposedly Chen style Tai Chi. In particular, the form I was learning was Sinja, right? So he starts progressing me. So in Tai Chi, there's no belts. You become what's called an inner door disciple, right? So he stops progressing me and stuff. I was helping him with this program down here in Los Angeles at Yosan University called Infinite Chi. And I still paid the half the tuition, which was $4,000. He charged me $4,000 because I already went through the medical program. And I completed all my case studies and everything else. And then he refused to advance me to finish, right? And so and he would say stuff to me, Tony, like, Chris, it's one thing to practice Tai Chi and Qigong. It's another thing to run a business. He tapped me on the shoulder. Let's see how long you last out there. Right?
What?
Seriously, brother. Like, seriously. So this was kind of taking the wind out of my sail, let alone, like, when you start your own business, people don't just come breaking down your door, right? So now I'm scrambling to find another Tai Chi instructor that teaches Xinjia Chen Style Tai Chi. And then I meet my Sifu, who I'm still with today after all these years, in San Francisco. His name is Tony Wong. I met him at Rengstorff Park, Mountain View, California. I started to show him the form that I had been learning for the last 11 years with this other guy. And he stops me a quarter of the way in. He goes, you've obviously have learned some Tai Chi principles, but this is not traditional Chen family Tai Chi. Therefore, if you want to study with me, you're going to have to start from the beginning. I was like, oh, man. I was like, so mad. I wanted blood, man. I was just like, oh, man. And the other thing, too, about this instructor doing this stuff was I was studying the Taoist teachings from Master Hua Xingni, right? And everything that was going on went against Taoist philosophy. Part of Taoist, one of the big things about is egolessness, right? Egolessness, and in doing this internal cultivation, this internal work, and so it was making me question the medicine, the philosophy, everything. So anyway, so then what ends up happening is that I started training with Tony, and Sifu Tony, I started diving in, man, and most of his students are Asian, and so there's a few of us that weren't. And so I started giving public demonstrations with this group throughout San Francisco, Oakland, stuff like that, Emeryville, all that kind of stuff. And then I started competing with Tai Chi. So I got back into the market, competing again. Competing with Tai Chi in competition and stuff as a martial art. It's funny when people say, how do you fight with Tai Chi? Because, Tai Chi is slow, right? So they say, how do you fight with Tai Chi? Tag, you're it.
Oh, I heard the snort. I heard the snort. We're gonna have to work with that one.
Oh, man.
That was amazing, man. That was truly amazing. I love the jokes. Oh man, because I'm a huge fan of martial arts myself, right? And we talked about this, competed when I was younger, MMA, jiu-jitsu, all of that good stuff. Dipped down into some Muay Thai and boxing as well, right? Everything kind of works in with one another if you know how to use it, right? That's why I've always been a big fan of just learning multiple things, because there's things that complement each other, from the different forms of kung fu, and even Tai Chi, right? If used the correct way. Now, I don't want to speak too much on that. I'm gonna let you answer that one. Is it possible to mix the styles in and make it beneficial to work? I already know the answer, but I was just curious.
Oh, definitely, because posture. One of the biggest things when you hear about the health benefits of Tai Chi, it's part of it is posture, and those movements teach you how to listen to your body. How to listen to your body. So, for example, I wish I could show you, but if my elbow is up like this, that now makes me weak, because look what it did to my shoulder. But if I drop my elbow, guess what? I'm stronger. Right. So first and foremost, like when I did a few amateur kickboxing smokers with Kung Lee's fight team, later on, kickboxing, obviously boxing, you start off across the ring from your opponent. Tai Chi, you start off touching your opponent. So as soon as you touch your opponent, that basic concept of being able to listen to yourself, then you learn how to listen to somebody else. In this case, listen to your opponent. So as soon as you touch your opponent, you can feel where she's holding tension inside the body. Where does that help? That helps with all kinds of things. It helps when grappling. It helps wrestling. It helps when you're in the clinch, stand up, boxing, Muay Thai, whatever. So it helps you be able to listen and then to move accordingly. And then some of those moves, some of those applications, we call them chinas, which are joint breaks or joint locks. You can then apply in there as well too. But I'll be honest with you, Tony, like if people say, I want to fight, I would recommend that they box, do jiu-jitsu, do Muay Thai, whatever, because the amount of time it takes to learn how to compete with Thai, it takes a long time. But what drove a fire underneath me to compete was that I knew I wanted to teach Tai Chi. I didn't want to teach it as a martial art. Like if you want to do it as a martial art, go train with Sifu, right, or whatever. I want to do it for teach it for health, right? But if a student of mine asks, okay, what is this application? I want to know from firsthand experience, not from theory, not from what a book says, not from what Sifu says, because I'm pretty much guarantee you that previous instructor had never competed, let alone probably never been in a street fight before in his life, right? It's one thing to talk, all right, throw the punch. Oh, this is warding off the punch. Well, you told me your backstory. Once things go down on the street, and this is what I tell people, it's one thing to train martial arts. The street is still totally different, because when you step in the ring, you're agreeing. It's a conscious agreement, and there's rules. On the street, there's no rules, right? So it's a totally different thing, right? So I started competing for the purpose of wanting to know, and it's like everything I do, like the medicine, the Chinese medicine part. I want to know from real experience what is happening, not from just theory or whatnot. And so long story short, every step of the way on this journey has been scary. The first step was starting the business. The second step was that as I was building my client base, finally, I was able to cut back my hours as a meat manager. A lot of people don't realize that, meat department is a business, right? And I was good with numbers. So I got to do something that was unheard of. I was able to write my own hours. So supervisors would send me to stores that were struggling, and they tell the management, hey, leave Shelton's, don't worry about his time and attendance, just let him do his thing. So I got it down to where I was only working 20 hours a week, just to keep my health benefits, right? Which was unheard of. But for the first 4 years of building Morning Crane, what happened was that I was working about 6 days a week, averaging 4 hours of sleep a night. And finally it got to be too much. And so after 21 years in the industry as a butcher, I retired, which is weird to say because I retired in my 30s, and I retired. So my next scary step was that, oh, shoot, I'm letting go of the secure paycheck. I'm letting go of these health benefits, right? So when I was working those 20 hours, I'd only work Friday, Sunday, and half a day on Monday, unless it was inventory day, right? And that was it. And you know what? The most amazing thing that happened was about a week or so after I retired, the Friday and Sunday and Monday filled up with patients, right? And so, so there's been scary steps. Every step that I've had to make, I was in that clinic in Los Gatos. I then moved to another clinic, and then the next scary step, and I still, subleasing from the Dr. Amy Allen. But then I moved from her clinic to another clinic in San Jose, or started my own clinic. That was the next scary step, because now I wasn't just paying a percentage on patients. Now I have a monthly rent that I have to pay, right? And then a year after that, next scary step was that the property management offered for me to take over the front of the building, where I built a classroom space where I was able to teach my classes. So I see my patients in the clinic, and then open up these French doors and goes into this beautiful classroom space. So there have been scary steps along the way. So my advice, this is a long-winded advice, but my advice to anybody is that perseverance, things are scary. There is unknowns. But if you believe in yourself, then it doesn't matter what anybody else says to you, as long as you believe in yourself. It's like one of my favorite cartoons was Aladdin. Remember with Robin Williams? And at one point, Robin Williams comes up, he transforms as a bee, goes, be yourself. I love that
scene. I love that, man, because you're bringing up some memories now, A lot of people don't know that Robin Williams actually played Aladdin, but that he actually was in the real Aladdin. Before a lot of things came along the line, right?
Yeah.
And so to hear you saying that, and I think there was another one, and I could be wrong, but do you remember the one that Sinbad did, the genie, when he was the genie? Long time ago. And he was coming there, what you talking about?
What you talking about? Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
and so a lot of people don't know that that story right there is what influenced a lot,
yeah,
right? Because it was the same thing. You had the magic carpet, right? You had the princess, you know, and it was just all kinds of just funniness that was going on. And I was like, as he was talking about that, I was like, man, I remember that one with Sinbad in there, old Sinbad, the comedian.
right. Yeah, that's bringing it back too. That's bringing it back. Excuse me, bringing it way back as well too. Yeah, yeah, man. So yeah, so that's so there's always, I think in order to grow, you have two choices. One, be safe,
Yeah,
stay in your little
yeah,
bubble,
yeah.
or take a chance and expand your bubble, as scary as that might be. And you'll be surprised. So many things that people told me I could not do,
Yeah.
proved them wrong. Proved
You
them wrong.
know, you know what part of the challenge is, Chris. People don't surround themselves with people that have been doing it right, and so when they hear these stories about the people that's going to disappoint you, the people that's going to stab you in the back, the betrayal, the loneliness that comes along with it, right? Because once you make a conscious decision to go along that path is meant to change you. There's a process that you have to go through. There's people that you're going to have to shed, right? Including yourself. Here's one of the challenges that I had, Chris, as I began to grow into who I am today. It was the sacrifices that came along with it that caught me off guard, right? Because I didn't know that I would have to give up this over here. And there's a chance that I may not make it. There's a chance that that I'm going to lose everything. And I didn't ever have a choice, right? The more and more I thought that I was good, I was like, no, I end up losing everything, right? And I think what happens a lot of times, people go along this to hear about those stories. They're not willing to give up their safety nets, right? They're not willing to get uncomfortable being uncomfortable. Or as David Goggins would say, no one knows how to be common amongst uncommon men.
Amen.
You
Amen.
know what I'm saying? And
Mhm.
so that first step is a true testament of your faith, right?
Mhm.
Can you walk blindly without without any sort of expectation? And yep, and I'll put this one up here. This is my friend Tina. Tina, how you doing, my friend? We'll put this up here. So she says, "There's so much we have to give up in life." This
Mhm.
is true. This is true. And thank you for that, Tina, because I think a lot of it, and I think we've had conversations around this. It's not really giving it up. It's, are you willing to see what's on the other side of that, right? And because you get so used to certain things that you expect things to be a certain way, and when they're not, it can force you to go back into a shell where you're afraid to explore um, what your path is truly like. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that we have a responsibility to God that we find our life's purpose. There's so many people that I run into that do not like their jobs, their vocation, their career choice. They dread it. The last years when I was first becoming a butcher, I used to enjoy it because it's hard work. We got a whole size of beef in. You got a lot of guys in there. We had a crew, a lot of ex-con stuff. We had fun. It was definitely a tight crew, right? Then as time went on, they started cutting back. Anyways, and I would dread last couple of years. I would dread going in. I go in at 2 o'clock in the morning, just so I wouldn't have to see anybody, write my orders and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And so, uh, you know, Dr. Mao is at a workshop here at Yosan one year, and he said something very profound. He says, we have an obligation to find our life's purpose, because the only way that God could really express itself is when one finds its life purpose, and it doesn't matter what it is. You can be a tow truck driver; it does not matter. And or healer, you could be a butcher, you could be anything, whatever's going to bring you that light, allowing God's light to shine through you. But it's becoming complacent, and then I don't want to get political or anything, but it's a system too that allows us to become complacent. Oh, you
Yeah.
don't have to work. We're just going to give you this check, right? And it's those kinds of things too, that you have to fight again. Because sure, yeah, it's easier just to say, okay, I'm just going to get this check every month or whatever. Or you say, you know what, I'm going to find something that I could do, even if it's working 2 or 3 jobs, in order so I could grow and become into or step into what God has planned for me. And I didn't know that being a healer was going to be my purpose. Did not know that. Was not on my radar at all. It wasn't until years later, even after I started my practice. And then finally, fast forwarding, I think it was around 2011, my old fight coach, Kung Lee, had referred me to this gentleman down here in LA named Eric the Trainer, Hollywood physique expert. He was this massive Jewish guy with long blonde hair. He looked like He-Man. And then, I met him. My wife and I were heading down here to do a fundraiser at the time with Robert Downey Jr. And we meet him by LAX. He says, Chris, I heard what you're doing in the San Francisco Bay Area. Nobody's doing that in Los Angeles. I said, Eric, give me a break, man. There's millions of people down here. He goes, no, I know the who's who. At first, I thought he was full of it because there's so many people that say that kind of stuff, right? Or say, oh, I'll connect you to this person. I'll connect you to that person. Yeah. No, man, he started giving me all of his high-profile clients. And then I realized, like, oh, shoot, like I've now developed a system that I could teach to other people. The treatment strategies, like the treatment strategies I talk about in my new back book, for example, are the same strategies that I use in here and get the same results over and over and over again, So it gave me the opportunity to really realize and recognize that, I am standing in or like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Because what finally came to me that I realized is I had all this joy. And the joy was seeing people get better. Nothing more makes me happier than you see somebody who's barely able to walk or whatever, and then they walk out of here like, what the heck just happened? I feel so much better. Like I have no more pain. That kind of joy. That's what makes this so much fun. When you see people that have been suffering, mentally suffering, physically suffering, and they're now out of pain or they're not mentally struggling anymore, for me, that was my joy, or that is my joy. And so we're on a mission, because I finally had to ask myself, because Eric was giving me all of his high profile clients. And like I said, I had kids from previous marriage. Oh, I got married again and then got divorced. That's a separate story. And so I had pretty much full custody of those 2 kids, younger kids, right? First it was Sunday through Friday, then became Monday. We gave her 1 extra day. So then it became Monday through Friday. So to keep the kids in the schools in the Bay Area, I dropped the kids off at school on Friday. I catch my flight. I land here in LA, see patients Friday, Saturday, Monday morning at the Toluca Lake Country Club, and I fly back before the kids got out of school, and then pick them up from school and hit the ground running. And I did that once or twice a month for 7 years, right? And I was killing myself. Well, both my wife and I were killing ourselves, and I had asked myself, well, what's my purpose? Because I don't get starstruck by anybody. I don't care who you are. I treat everybody the same, right? And so I realized, like, oh, shoot, the next stage of my career to show the world that you don't have to live with pain, you don't have to live with disease, is television. So that's why we're here. That's why we're in Los Angeles, is to spread the word. And I give, because of our government contracts and stuff, I give talks to trauma nurses and doctors on disease prevention. I go into the jails, I give talks on disease prevention, sheriff's department, county supervisor's office. And I have a way of talking about this stuff that makes sense, right? Because I'm not coming from this woo-woo, weird, mystic place. And, especially being as a Christian, other Christians be like, that's kind of woo-woo what you're doing, Chris. I'm like, oh, Lord Jesus Christ could heal. I could heal too. He flows through me. He flows through me. So when people get healed, I say it's a trio. It's the patient, me as the vehicle, and Christ emanating through me, or God's work emanating through me, right? I'm just the vehicle. So being able to, realize, like, oh, wow, I finally have found my life purpose. And what's interesting is somebody, because we have something called the Chi Club that we started during the pandemic. It's a live Qigong classes Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And we have on Zoom, we have people from around the world that join. And one of the founding members of the Chi Club, this guy Tim, he had messaged me. I think it was on Instagram or something, and he says, "When is enough enough? When is enough going to be enough for you, Chris?" And I sat on that one, and for me, yes, we're putting in the work and stuff like that. But for me, once I have my vision, I see my vision. When my vision's fulfilled, then that'll be enough. Or maybe it won't be. Maybe I'll hit that vision, and then I'll have another vision.
Right.
But to sit there and say that, man, you've been grinding out, you know, when you're going to back off? Well, you know, by the grace of God, I've been able to cut back my patient load and stuff like that because we've had other opportunities come up. No, enough is enough when I've been able to touch as many souls as possible.
Right.
Even then, that's not enough because there's still more souls to help, right? There's still more people to educate, to uplift, right? You know, it's like what you do. It's like what you do with your podcast here, and you uplift. And stuff that you're doing is beautiful, brother. Stuff you're doing is amazing.
Oh, man, I appreciate that. You know, it's the same thing though, right? You know, I don't take credit for any of it, right? I to be honest with you, I just love doing this, and if it helps people, not only if it helps them find the resources that they need, and it gives them something to hold on to, and they can share it and be brave enough to talk about the things that they go through, then it's such an honor. It's a beautiful honor to be able to do it, right? Because it's an honor and a privilege, because without the amazing individuals like yourself, I couldn't have conversations with, like, you know, have the conversations on in depth the way that we do, and to be able to change people's lives, right? It would just be an impossible feat. You have to have, like you said, your vision. Then you have to go after that vision. You have to be willing to be submissive to it and obedient to it. You know, be willing to, as Eric Thomas say, be willing to sacrifice who you are in order to become who you're supposed to be. Right? And that's the part right there. And the amount of work that it comes into it, because most people give up because of the sheer exhaustion of it, right? Putting everything, learning all the things that you need to make this well-oiled machine grow and operate on a smoother level, right? And that's the one thing I learned about grief too, is that grief is different, right? Like, it doesn't have a blueprint, because just only in a recent, I would say, 10 years have grief become such a prominent thing to talk about. More people now are out sharing their gifts amongst people, out in the open. So now it makes it easier to find support groups. It makes it easier to find podcasts and stuff to listen to, you know. And it's such a beautiful thing to watch everything grow the way it's supposed to. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, again, I think that, you know, I agree with everything that you're saying, and you know, I believe that what a lot of people don't realize is that we could co-manifest with God our reality. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is that we have a saying in Chinese philosophy. They have a saying that your thoughts are louder than thunder in heaven. Your thoughts are louder than thunder in heaven. So what does that mean? That means when you think something, if you think something negative about yourself, you say something negative about yourself, guess what? That's a vibration. One of the things my dad used to, you know, he was a very, you know, coming from Panama, you know, immigrant from Panama, my abuela, my grandmother, you know, they had to fight, work in the fields, all that kind of stuff, deal with discrimination, all that kind of stuff. And so she was abusive. The struggles they had, I think that's what made him so angry, you know. Plus he was in Vietnam, saw some stuff over there and stuff, you know. So I think that's what made him so angry. And you know, some of the verbal stuff he'd say to me would be like, "Chris, you're such a dumb shit." Excuse me, I don't.
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay.
It's your show, brother.
Yeah, yeah. You're such a dumb shit. Or one of my favorite ones that he would say is, "Man, what were you thinking? You're enough to make a wet dream go bad." And I was like a little kid, like,
there it goes again.
what does that even mean? does that mean?
So self-esteem just went out the window. Like,
What? Oh man,
Oh, that
killing me.
was good. That was good. That make you think about some stuff, right? Like your self-esteem is gone after that once you figure that out. Like,
Right.
hold on, what the? Oh man, the recovery on that one is not good.
No, man, it messes with you. It messes with you, right?
Yeah, man, like that's not even good. Just sit around like, what? What did you just do? Like, I'm gonna need therapy just messing with Joe.
Yeah, because what you just said just messed with me on a whole new level. Like,
oh my god, man! And I be saying stuff like when I'm driving and I get behind somebody real slow, I'll go, "You guys enough to make a wet dream just leave." Oh my god. I don't know why I say that, but I do. I will sit around. I'm like, man, y'all enough to make a wet dream just like, or I'll say something like, man, mess around with y'all. I'll be late tomorrow on wet dream. So I don't know why, but I don't know why I became obsessed with calling people saying the word wet dream. But I was like, it's the only nicest thing that I could say. Right? And I'm working on language and things like that. So, it's just like, how can I say it in a way to where it's not disrespectful, but it's disrespectful?
Right.
Well,
there you go. Yeah. So my dad would say that. So yeah. So I found that I finally realized as I was getting older, like if I spilled my cup of coffee, stubbed my toe, I'd be like, Chris, you dumb shit. What's wrong with you? That was the inside talk I was having,
Right.
And then I realized, and I think it was my senior year in high school was the first time this idea of quantum mechanics or quantum physics was presented to me, that you could actually co-manifest. And I was in an advanced English class my senior year of high school, and the teacher was a very masculine instructor, right? And this after heart attacks. Oh, and I forgot that I was suicidal. My mom walked in on me with my 22 rifle underneath my chin, which led me into psychiatry and stuff like that. So that was a different thing. But anyway, so I was telling him about what had been going on, and he goes, wow, Chris, he goes, the way that you carry yourself, you don't strike me as somebody that would be going through that kind of stuff, He says, so I want you to do this homework assignment every day. He goes, I want you to look at yourself in the mirror, put your hand on your heart. He goes, I want you to say to yourself, I love myself and I believe in myself and I'm beautiful, confident, and strong, right? Every day, look yourself in the mirror. Because we always talk at ourselves in the head, right? It's a whole other thing to look at yourself in the mirror. So I tried it a few times and I thought it was the goofiest thing on earth, And but periodically throughout the years, what ended up happening was that different people would mention it. And then I saw the movie, What the Bleep Do We Know About This World? And which is based upon quantum physics and a co-manifestation of your reality. And so what I realized, the universe is really ours if we know how to control this, right? And our visions and what we're saying to ourselves. It's just like, when people see, here we had, these riots in LA here, and people are seeing this stuff, but also too, people that are sitting at home and having the same angry thoughts, hateful thoughts. Guess what? It's a vibration, and it further feeds into all that stuff. It's a vibration. So how we're thinking goes a long way. And so if you want, for example, I used to be a very controlling person, angry and controlling, and the reason why I was controlling was because I felt that if I could control my environment, I could control my outcomes. But I found like I figured out I was being controlling in my relationships as well too. So I couldn't sit there and say I choose to co-create with God that I'm less controlling, because you say that we're controlling, then what happens is that you become more controlling. Yeah. So I had to find the words that are opposite for me of controlling, and for me, the opposite of controlling was being loving and compassionate. So my mantra in the mirror was, I choose to co-create with God that I am, not that I will be, because that pushes it into the future. I am compassionate and loving. And then that's how you start to transmute and you start to transform what is. And so, and this happened throughout my business. Again, I grew up kind of poor, man. Started working at age 11. We had government assistance. I think you and I talked about this. The powdered milk, no matter how much, it does not taste like milk. I don't know what I'm trying to tell you. It does.
Oh, man. We was talking about, we brought us some memories, man. We talked about the cheese that you had to cut.
The cheese, yeah.
But if you got it to melt, it was one of the best grilled cheese sandwiches ever, right? The bologna that you had to chop up. And of course, you always had the little chunks in there that was thicker than the rest. Oh, my God. Look, man, we talked about all of that, man. Like, and so we can relate, right? You know what I'm saying? And I know there's a lot of people probably right now laughing like, oh my God, if they're coming from the same generation, they know exactly what we're talking about. They're just like, man, y'all better stop. They probably won't say anything because it's going to show our age and stuff like that, Oh man. But so man, I love all of that, right? I love the direction that it took you in, but you also suffered a major loss too, right? With your friend.
Yeah. Okay. So fast forward, that friend of mine, Eric the trainer, his name is Eric the trainer, Hollywood physique expert. And, I traveled all over the place with him. He pulled me into all kinds of gigs, but I'd had to put in the work though. What does that mean? That means that he would refer the celebrity clients to me, but I had to get results. Otherwise he's not going to be giving me more clients, right? He's not going to be pulling me into gigs and stuff like that. And we did all kinds of stuff together, man. He was a fun guy. He would just, you go through the airport with him. He just start talking to anybody, and charismatic, funny. You go to his private gym that's over here by the Burbank airport, and you never knew who you were working out, or what celebrity or what person on Broadway or, film writer or whatever, like screenwriter, whatever. And, he brought me into things like I was on tour with Def Leppard and Journey, treating the band and stuff like that for a year and stuff. So like we hung out, we traveled a lot. COVID hits and, everything shuts down except for me, my wife. We lived in a bubble, man, because I was still flying back and forth between San Jose and LA treating patients. And now I'm mostly treating patients with COVID, right? Anyways, so his wife at the time was really COVID afraid. And, so she locked him up and stuff, and and fast forward, I met him one day at his gym. He goes, brother, I'm not sleeping and I have anxiety. So I said, all right, man. I said, you take these 2 sets of herbs, and I said, I want you to journal what your thoughts are every night before you go to bed, like what happened during the day. So that way you quiet your mind. And I want you on the Chi Club, which, by the way, Eric started. Eric was the one that started the Chi Club, because everything shut down. So he started something called the Sleep Ninja Workout. It was like 5 days a week, 6 days a week. And during that hour class, Zoom class, he would have different celebrities on, like Phil Collins. Hey, Phil, what are you up to today? Right? Have these different people on. So as he's saying, doing your push-ups, doing the count for your push-ups or your leg ups or whatever, you'd have these different celebrities, and it made it fun. And then he had puppets. He's a goofy, funny guy. He had puppets,
Yeah.
So he was just one of those kind of people, right? Very charismatic, funny, just a connector of the people. And so anyway, so I told him, I said, I want you on the Chi Club every day. And so he tried it for about a week. And at the time, I think he was off his testosterone or whatever, because they were trying to get pregnant. And his wife had texted me, and she says, Eric's driving me crazy. I'm taking him to the doctor. And then the doctor totally disempowered him, because the doctor said, no matter how much yoga you do, no matter how much journaling you do, that won't fix this. And he put him on a sleep medication, an anti-anxiety pill, and an anti-depression pill. Wow. Within about 6 or 7 days, Eric called me to help me plot his suicide, because I was the only one that he trusted enough, only one closest to him enough to help him do something like this. And so I said, well, we ain't going to do that. This is what we are going to do. So I went over to their house. I went to Chinatown here in LA, grabbed some feng shui stuff, went over to their house, feng shuied their bedroom, feng shuied their house to kind of change the energy flow and stuff like that. Give them other, supplements like liquid vitamin D, things that are good for your mood and those types of things. And was giving him treatments. And brother, we had him. He was in a good place, man. He was doing really good. And then somewhere along the way, I stopped hearing about what was going on with him. Unless I went to this gym, and he say, "Hey, man, my back hurts. Can you work on my back or whatever?" But I stopped hearing. But all of a sudden, Eric started to become more aggro, And so my wife and I, like I said, I realized our mission is next mission is television, right? To get the word out there. So we've been working on this project for the last several years, shot a couple sizzle reels. And then Eric finally introduced me to this director to make a short film, a documentary film that's coming out actually to the film festivals this year, finally. And so we finance it. We finance all the stuff ourselves, And we got the first pass of it, and it came out so good that Eric thought he was going to win an Oscar. I was like, well, that might be putting the cart before the horse. It's good, but I don't know. I'll take the Oscar, but you know what I'm saying? And then he started. What happened was that then he started pulling things behind my back, like doing things. For example, like my director, she started acting crazy. She is a young director. She started getting, acting weird and stuff like that. I think she forgot at the time who was paying who, and then one day I go into the gym and Eric says to me, he goes, "Hey man," he goes, "Don't worry." He goes, I talked to tech, we got everything all straightened out. Right. I was like, all right, cool. Later on that night, the director calls me and she says, "I don't know if you're aware of this, but Eric called me earlier this morning and said that he wants to be executive producer on your film." I didn't even know what executive producer was. I'm not from Hollywood, right? I had to look it up. Right? And when I looked it up, I was like, what the hell? I was like, what the heck, right? So I was mad. So the next day I go and pull him into his office. I said, "Hey, brother." I said, "What are you doing, man?" I said, "Talk to me." He goes, "Oh, man." He goes, "I don't need to be executive producer." I said, "No, brother." I said, "If you having that title helps you, I believe we lift each other up. And if you having that title helps you with your other projects, then have it. But my wife and I are going, since we financed it, especially, we're going to be executive producers too, right?" And then things just started getting progressively crazier. And I caught them. They made another version of my film without me knowing about it. And then finally, I had to pull the project. And and I'm very vocal, especially my friends are very vocal. Like, like, "Hey, man, you're hurting me, man. Like, what are you doing? And so he was trying to get our name kicked off. And then when I caught them making the second version, I still going to extend an olive branch. And I sent an email to all of them. And I said, "Okay, I want a new contract. Here's some bullet points that I want. But lastly, I shouldn't have to say this, but all decisions go through my wife and myself." And they sent an email back. They said, "We agreed to all the above, except for our only point of contact is Eric." I said, "All right, we're done. And we're this close to the film festivals, this close to going." So I pulled the project. And then what happened was that now fast forward, right? Then they tried to extort me for more money to get my hard drives back, tried to extort me for more money. By the grace of God, one of Oprah's attorneys showed up in my life and started giving me guidance. And he's a godsend. He's still in my life today. Anyways, so I gave the film to another editor to make some minor tweaks, right? And then once I gave it to him, I got to take a step away from Eric. This around August, I think, 2022. My anger turned into compassion because I realized my friend was acting this way because he was sick. He was mentally not well. And so my plan was that I was still going to extend an olive branch to him. With anybody else, it probably would not do this. You burn me once and I'm done. I'm gone. But we had such a special friendship, right? And then, so then November 11th is my wife's anniversary, mine. So got married 11/11/11. So he texted me, "Hey, love and miss you guys. Happy anniversary." And I said, "Hey, Eric," I said, "love and miss you too. Let's get together and talk soon." And my plan was that as soon as I got the film back, I was going to sit down with him and talk to him about moving forward to the film festival. So that's November 11th. Unfortunately, on Thanksgiving morning, he shot himself in the head, and 3 days later, I got my film back, so I never got a chance to have that conversation.
That one's a deep one.
Mm.
That was a deep one because I know that was a dear friend of yours, and like you said, anyone else you'd have been cut off, man. So I understood. I understand what that feels. That feeling. Right?
Mhm.
I could never understand what you felt going through it, but that feeling is deep, man. It's very, very deep. Thank you for sharing that as well. And after that, what was the process that you took to begin to come to terms, heal, and be able to use that in a way to where you help other people as well?
Wow. Well, I wasn't. What's the term? I wasn't set free that quickly. Just a rewind. My father passed away 2 months before Eric. September. Eric passed away November. Both of them are in the short film that's coming out to the film festivals this year. And then what happened was that I got blacklisted from the family because what they told the media was different than their truth, number one. Number two, when certain celebrities would call me, because Eric was such a beam of light, when certain celebrities would call me and I tell them, I'm going to tell you the story about what happened a year and a half before. And when I check in with myself, my only purpose for me to tell you the story about him coming to me to plot his suicide, if it helps you heal, that's my only purpose. I got no gains. Like if TMZ or whatever was to call me, I'd just play stupid. Like, I don't know you, but you knew Eric, and everybody was just like, if I'm as happy as him, am I going to do the same thing? And everybody I told the story to that was close to Eric, they thanked me. They start crying. A lot of them start crying, and they thanked me. They said, because now it makes sense. And now it makes sense, right? And so I wasn't let off that easy, I did, first year I lose my friend, and then, I'm not allowed to speak at his service. I'm told not to come to his vigil, and certain celebrity people are asking, like, where's Chris at? Because they knew we're buds.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening from there was, again, a lot of people, that kind of stuff would have stopped the forward direction. And instead, we decided, no, we're still going to work on this project. Unfortunately, and I go and tell them this stuff because I want people to understand when I talk about perseverance and facing challenges and facing hardships and those kinds of things. So then, we're interviewing different directors to try to finish this short film. And only small tweaks need to be made. And then that old fight coach of mine, Kung Lee, he said, oh, well, why don't you talk to me, because Kung got into movies and stuff like that. So he introduced me to the showrunner named Victor, and Victor is Ukrainian, or he said he was Ukrainian. And he spoke fluent Chinese and did Chinese martial arts, wushu. I was like, that's perfect. Even though this documentary isn't really all about martial arts, it's, at least he understands the philosophy. Long story short, we paid him $80,000 for 2 scripts and a week of shooting. And when I got the footage back, the footage is crap. I can't use it. He talked me out of doing a dramedy style TV show into doing a documentary style TV show into doing a dramedy, which went against, which is a comedy kind of talking about what I do and then showing like the clinical practice and stuff. And the footage is horrible. I can't use it. I can't make it into a show. I can't submit it to Amazon or to anybody else, not with my name on it. So anyways, so boom, 80 grand gone, and then there's some other things now recently that have come up surrounding that as well too, that now we're having to take legal action. But I still persevered, Tony. I still said, you know what? I still have a vision. I have a vision that I have a TV show that shows what it is that I do. And the TV show has inspired and has helped millions of people around the world. And And then from there, what's happened is that people get so inspired from the show that they come from around the world and they come and study with me, because the success that I have in clinical practice, I could teach to other people. Then they go back into their communities and then they help other people. Right. So I see that vision. So no matter what, take the $80,000, give me junk. Try to steal my footage from me. Ain't going to stop me. Ain't going to stop me. I still see the vision. And so we have these great interns from local film school here in LA. They're wrapping up some minor little details on the 15-minute short. I have the composer CJ Vanston, who's composing the score for the film. And it's going to touch a lot of lives, just that 15-minute short. And then from there, I already foresee the vision that the show will happen. And what's funny about me saying, or the show has happened. And what's funny about me saying that, no pun intended, but no matter what goes on in your life, the show must go on.
This is true. This is true. And that's, I mean, you got the vision of it. You're pushing out, and I'm excited to see this come into fruition in life, because I just know it's just going to be phenomenal. So I know you got to run. I know you got to run to another, go through your things and everything. So before I let you go, I want to have a couple more questions for you, my brother.
Okay.
First question would be, how can people find you?
So you find me on, go to Shelton Qigong.com. And Qigong is spelled Qigong. So if you find me on Instagram, Facebook, or Instagram, Facebook, then it's or YouTube, then it's Chris Shelton Qigong. TikTok, I do a lot of face reading. We didn't get into that, but I face read to diagnose, and that's a lot of fun. So TikTok is Chris_Shelton_ Qigong. And reach out to me if you have any questions. Like I said, I have 2 new books come out this year. One is Chris Shelton's Easy Guide to Fix Neck and Back Pain Yourself. The other one was that came out in January was Chris Shelton's Easy Guide to Emotional Well-Being with Qigong. And that book, by the way, is dedicated to Eric the Trainer and to all the people out there that are suffering with depression and suicidal ideologies, and also for those who are survivors of those who have transitioned too soon.
Yeah, and I was really fortunate. You sent me a signed copy, man. I can't wait to dive into it. And most importantly, I can't wait to be able to meet everybody in person, and all the amazing things that are coming, because it's just one of those things. You just kind of feel the energy that's generated from it, right? And it just expands out in so many different ways. So now my second question to you, Chris, would be, if Chris had a superpower, what would it be?
Chris had a superpower. What would it be? Man, nobody's ever asked me that question. Superpower, what would that be? I guess if I had a superpower, the superpower would be to be able to self-empower everyone to see their fullest potential.
Okay, I can see that. And why?
Why? Because as we talked about earlier in our conversation, a lot of the grief and turmoil that we have in our lives is actually self-created. And if we believe in ourselves, if we're empowered, then there's nothing that we can't do. And if you ever wish for a utopia that could actually, happen, it happens when everybody can see their fullest potential, because everybody knows what their part is. And there's not this struggle and fight, or you're different than me or whatever. No, we all work together for the whole. It's like a tribe of coyotes or mountain lions or whatever. They work together as a tribe of the whole, not just the one. And as human beings, and I think it's because people have been disempowered, that they feel that they have to fight, they have to struggle, But if they're empowered, then we're like, okay, self-empowerment, then we get to come together as a whole for the common good of all people, right? Not just the one.
I love that. And one other thing, if you could leave the audience with something, what would you leave them with?
you could heal your mental emotional trauma. And Qigong is not a belief structure. What I love about Qigong is that it does not discriminate against race, religious or spiritual background, gender, none of that stuff. It's applied for all people. It's meant for all people. And you don't have to live with physical pain, and you don't have to live with emotional pain. And as I started off in today's conversation, the leading cause of death and chronic pain is a lot of times because of emotions. And so there are some simple tools out there to be able to, that you could access today that are easy. I have it for free. Even if you don't want to buy my book, that's okay. Go to my YouTube channel. I got the 30 days of Qigong on there for free. So each day I talk about the practice, why you're doing it according to Chinese medicine, and each day builds on top of the next. And then this gives you the tools necessary to be able to process the day-to-day stuff, and also more importantly, the accumulation of the old stuff. Because once we're able to process that and really live in the present moment, then we're really able to live the life that God had designed for us to live.
And I love that. I love that. And as we wrap this one up for everybody, I want to say thank you to my guest, my brother, Chris Shelton, for joining us today. On such a tight schedule, man, and just embracing us with your story, man. It's such a huge inspiration. And people, his information is in the YouTube channel, so go in there, check it out. And while you're there, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. And maybe these conversations aren't for you just yet. Maybe you know someone who could benefit from the conversation that we have. Do me a favor, share this along with them. All right. Other than that, people, thank you guys for rocking with us for another episode. You guys know who it is, And of course, we do this every day. So go back and check the reruns on this. Go find that support that you need and deserve. And most importantly, guys, make sure that you're out here making memories with the people that you love every day, because you never know when tomorrow may not come for you, right? And again, thank you, Chris. For everyone else, we're going to see you guys in the next one, and have an amazing, blessed day. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tony.